Welcome back to the programme. Saudi Arabia has decided to suspend all dialogue with Qatar. That's after the Qatari media was accused of misreporting on phone conversations between the Emir of Qatar and Saudi Arabia's defence minister. Previously, the US President Donald Trump urged the Gulf states to unite against Iran and expressed his willingness to act as a mediator between Doha and Riyadh. Earlier, though, in June, he alleged that Qatar was a sponsor of terrorism.
If I can help mediate between Qatar and, in particular, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, I would be willing to do so. The nation of Qatar, unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level.
Donald Trump made those remarks back in June when 4 countries in the region first cut diplomatic and transport links with the Gulf nation. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Bahrain and the UAE accuse Qatar of supporting terrorism. The US has its largest airbase in the Middle East in Qatar. Around 11,000 American troops are stationed there. Just weeks after welcoming the blockade, President Trump approved a fighter jet deal with the Gulf Kingdom worth $12 billion. Well, let's bring in Seyed Marandi, a professor of politics at Tehran University. Welcome to the programme, Seyed. First, let's look at what President Trump has been claiming. Claims that the Qatar crisis is easy to solve. Let's have a quick listen to him.
If I can help mediate between Qatar and, in particular, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, I would be willing to do so. And I think you'd have a deal worked out very quickly. I think it's something that's going to get solved fairly easily. OK, so
you had a quick listen to that. Why do you think that it's so difficult to get the sides, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, to the negotiating table?
I think the most important problem is the Saud family itself, and Mohammed bin Salman in particular. He's very young. He was born a billionaire. He has yes men surrounding him. And he's created a mess. It's not just in his relationship with Qatar that we see this problem. He invaded Yemen. He's been killing the Yemeni people. His Air Force has been bombing hospitals, funerals, weddings, schools, and innocent civilians for almost 3 years now with Western support, with US support, both under Obama and Trump. And to no avail. He's lost the war effectively. He's been spreading Wahhabi extremism. He and his father and the regime before his father had been spreading extremism in Syria, in Iraq, and across the board. Wahhabism is something that the Saudis export. But what is extraordinary is that the Saudi regime has become so erratic and so unpredictable that now it's turned against one of the few regimes that has an identical ideology. Qatar, along with Saudi Arabia, these are the 2 countries that explicitly declare themselves to be Wahhabi. The large mosque in Doha is called the Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab Mosque. So the Saudis are, it's not just an issue of sectarianism. They are even turning against Wahhabis like themselves. So I don't think the United States will have an easy task in bringing these countries together. And even if they do, I don't think the Qataris are going to trust the Saudis in future. And Trump himself is not considered to be a very reliable partner himself, as the Republican Party has just discovered themselves.
I suppose if we break down the crisis, it's down to alleged terrorist links with Iran. Are there any new developments on that front?
Well, the Iranian-Qatari relationship has never been severed, despite Saudi pressure. And in fact, the Saudis have failed to disrupt the relationship between Iran and other countries, such as Oman. The Saudis, on the other hand, are putting enormous pressure on Kuwait to distance itself from Iran. But in the case of Qatar, I think it backfired. They went way too far by trying to humiliate the country and take away its sovereignty. So the Qataris, which were banned from using, they were blockaded by not only Saudi Arabia, but its allies like the Emirates and Bahrain, from the land and the sea and air, there was an effective blockade. They were preventing food from getting in. And the only way forward for Qatar was to turn to Iran. And of course, the Iranians felt that they had an obligation to support the Qataris. And this is something that the Saudis have been doing for a long time. The Iranian relationship with the people of Yemen has evolved and improved, and they've grown closer to each other because of the Saudi invasion of the country. The same is true with what the Saudis and their allies did in Syria and Iraq. They basically brought these countries closer to Iran because these countries saw the Saudi ideology, the Wahhabi extremist ideology, which Al-Qaeda and ISIS and Boko Haram and others are linked to. They saw this, the extremists and this ideology, as a threat to their existence, and they moved to Iran, which they saw as a very reliable partner. So it's basically the Saudis who've been shooting themselves in the feet time after time.
OK, well, we've run out of time there. Professor of Politics at Tehran University, Seyed Marandi, thanks very much for coming onto the programme.
Thank you for having me.